And hello and welcome to Open. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and throughout the year, we worked hard to keep you, our viewers, informed about current events, politics, health, wellness, and so much more throughout the year 2022. On this edition of Open, we'll take a look at some of the most impactful segments. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. We're officially now open. And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best of Open Wednesday. We also want to welcome our viewers on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network as Open is being broadcast simultaneously on MNN's channels. Now, you can stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. As head of pediatrics at Advantage Care Physicians, our first guest is a vocal advocate for children and community health, focusing on underserved populations. Deeply attuned to the mistrust that's held in the healthcare system by communities of color, and as a Black woman physician, as well as a leader, she emphasizes empathy, education, and quells fears and the hesitation towards the industry amongst her patients. We had the chance to speak to the department chair of pediatrics at Advantage Care, Dr. Beverly Shepard. Let's take a look.
Yes, and so as we talk about disparities in healthcare, we know that particularly in African-American communities, communities of color, there are already these health disparities. But when we talk about COVID-19, we could talk about the disparities in communities of color, but then drill it down a little bit further and talk about how it actually affects young people, especially in that pediatric age. So talk to us about what are we seeing right now as we're navigating through COVID-19 with the disparities and the push to really get young people into the healthcare system.
Yes, the disparities were quite apparent during the COVID, and currently apparent during this pandemic that we're having right now. As we all know, these disparities have existed prior to the pandemic, and what the pandemic did was just basically put a spotlight on it. Black and Latino populations were dying at a higher rate from COVID-19. We were suffering from more of the morbidity and the complications, significant disruption in our families. We at Advantage Care Physicians wanted to address that, and myself as the chair of the Department of Pediatrics wanted to ensure that the 48 pediatricians that I supervise and oversee, that we continue to offer as much advice as we can, as much, as much education as we could to our population, because we do serve a community of basically disadvantaged youth and families and children of color.
Yeah. So what do you notice to be some of the primary challenges that we're facing, particularly as we talk about young children of color when it comes to healthcare?
Vaccines. I think that the inherent distrust that we see in the Black community with regards to healthcare and how we were treated in the past as a community, there is that distrust that makes our community hesitant sometimes to seek medical care and to seek it in a timely fashion, so that by the time we see some of our patients, it's really very late in terms of the disease process that has taken place. And some families are hesitant in terms of getting vaccines for their children. I mean, it's a well-known fact, and science has proven that vaccines prevent disease. They prevent polio, they prevent whooping cough, they prevent diphtheria, they prevent tetanus, they prevent measles. It is a well-known fact that vaccines are safe and they're effective. And it is so imperative that we as a community immunize our children against these diseases. And it's something where we're seeing that lag in our communities, and it's something where we try to educate our population as much as possible as to the safety and efficacy of vaccines. So as a pediatrician, I believe in preventive care. I believe in children getting vaccinated against these diseases that can be lethal, that can be fatal. And that is my goal, to educate as much as I can on the community level, on the office level, on the individual level, and in venues such as this, being able to speak to my community.
Yeah. Well, as a person with boots on the ground, obviously you do a lot of talking to young people as well as to parents. When it comes to the issue of vaccine hesitancy, are we seeing that it's still prevalent, given the fact that we go from one variant to another, and a lot of people sometimes have distrust in what we're hearing out of government, because it seems to be mixed messages. One day we're good, one day we're not. One day it's mask, one day it's relax the mask. You know, a lot of moving changes, and I would suppose that when you have this hesitancy, all it does is make people a little bit more hesitant.
Right. And you're absolutely right. And so what we have to remember, Daren, we're living in unprecedented times. None of us have lived through a pandemic. Okay. The last pandemic was in the early 1900s with the influenza. And so this is uncharted territory for all of us. So what we're doing is, you have to follow the data. You have to follow the trends, and you have to make decisions based on the data and the trends that you are seeing. So yes, we have seen variants with regards to this virus. You know, we had Delta, now we have Omicron. You know, what's coming next, we don't know, but we know that there will probably be other variants. And we have to be prepared to be able to protect ourselves from those variants, and look at the behavior of these variants. How lethal are they? How virulent are these variants? Are the vaccines working to mitigate some of the fatalities and the complications that we have been seeing in the past? And the data has shown that vaccines do help. Vaccines do lessen the rate of hospitalization, lessen the rate of death, lessen the rate of severe disease with COVID-19. That information, that education, that knowledge must be imparted to our community, that we will feel confident in coming in to be vaccinated. And I think we have to continue, as I said, continue to educate and understand where our people are coming from when they manifest, or they discuss the fact that they are hesitant. Some of my patients will say to me, "Oh, this vaccine was made too quickly. How come they have this vaccine out so quickly?" Well, and my response is, thank God we were able to get this vaccine out in a rapid manner. And the reason why we were able to do that is because of modern science. Science has progressed considerably from back 30-something years ago. I've been in practice for over 35 years, okay? The vaccines that I administered 35 years ago, they've been modified. They're even safer than what they were 35 years ago. But by the same token, they were all still very, very effective. When we talk about vaccine hesitancy, I try to relate some of the personal experiences that I have. Okay, so we actually went into the schools and started vaccinating children in school against COVID-19. And a lot of parents are like, "Oh no, I don't want the vaccine done in school." Well, as you can see, I've been around for quite some time. When I was a child, the polio vaccine was administered in school. In the late 50s, early 60s, in kindergarten, I was instructed by class. We all went down to the auditorium. We held out our hand. They handed us a sugar cube, which was our polio vaccine. It was given orally then. Now we give it as an injection because it's safer to give the injected model of the injected formulation of polio vaccine. But it is very effective. Do we see polio now? No. And why don't we see polio? Because of vaccinations. Do we see smallpox now? No. And why don't we see smallpox? Because of vaccinations. In fact, smallpox has been eradicated. So we no longer administer that vaccine. That is not one of the routine immunizations that we give to children. So do we just want to arbitrarily inject children with unnecessary vaccines? No. Or unnecessary medications? No, we do not. When the threat is gone, we stop administering that medication, or that vaccination or immunization, if you will.
Yeah, I can't let you go without asking you this question, because when we talk about vaccine hesitancy, we know that it's real in communities of color, a lot of distrust. And when we talk about coming into the office, and I've got an African-American healthcare practitioner right in front of me. So there is a level of trust, I would assume, that you bridge the gap in many kinds of ways, because, we understand that there is racism also in the healthcare system. So give us a little bit about what that's been like for you, being this woman who's an African-American woman who has the ability to actually talk to clients. And I know that there's a sense of trust that's built by seeing someone who looks like them, understands the plight of the community from behind the desk.
Right. And so I've been both patient and a provider. So I can speak from both sides of that table. And, you know, one of the things that I impart to my patients is make sure you ask the questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question or an ignorant question or a question that it's inappropriate. Ask the questions. If you're not clear, ask it and ask it again. Okay, try to develop that communication with your physician. I myself have been, you know, my family have experienced instances where we felt that perhaps, you know, it could have been handled differently within the healthcare profession, even with myself as a physician. So you want to ensure that you're asking the questions. Make sure you keep those lines of communication open with your doctor. And if you do not feel comfortable, then by all means, you know, request a switch of your primary care physician. You know, we do need to see more people of color taking up jobs and pursuing careers in the healthcare professions. I mean, we need more diversity within healthcare to address some of the cultural differences, not just among African Americans and the healthcare profession, but also Asian Americans and Latino Americans and Muslim Americans. We want to be able to address all of the diverse communities that we have that make up the United States, that make up New York City. And at Advantage Care Physicians, that's one of the things that we strive to do. And I think that we do a very good job at it.
Yeah, I'm coming up on a hard stop, but I want to be able to ask the question before I go. You were recently named to Crain's 2022 Notable Black Leaders list. Just first of all, congratulations, and second of all,
thank you.
Your thoughts on being awarded.
Well, it's truly an honor. I mean, I've been in the practice, as I said, for over 35 years, and to be recognized for the work that I do is truly an honor. But even though it's an honor, it's what I do, and I, even without the recognition, it's something that I want to do. I want to be able to make a difference in the lives of our young children. I want to be able to set an example for our children of color, to empower them to know that, you know, certain goals are attainable in life, and that they should continue to strive and to just present, you know, a healthy lifestyle, so that, you know, young people will pursue that avenue as opposed to others.
Well, Dr. Shepard, it's definitely been an honor having you here, and thank you again. Congratulations on being named to Crain's 2022 National Black Leaders List, and also for the work that you've been doing in impacting the lives of so many people. It's been our pleasure. Thanks for being with us.
And thank you for having me. And you keep up the good work that you're doing, also getting the word out to our communities.
Gonna try. All righty. Well, listen.
And we've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more show right after this.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
And welcome back. ArchCare provides quality care to thousands of people of all faiths through its home and community-based and residential programs. We spoke with the Senior Vice President and Chief Experience Officer at ArchCare, Hugo Pizarro, to provide us with more insight.
It's got to be a great time for you having this certification. So for somebody who may not be so familiar, what exactly is the Great Place to Work certification?
Absolutely. Daren, first, thank you for making some time for me today. So the Great Place to Work certification, they are the global authority on workplace culture, employee experience, employee engagement. We set out on a journey back in 2019 and set a goal to be certified by 2023. So we got a little bit ahead of our goal, but it's all a good thing.
Well, congratulations. And I mean, as you look at this certification, it's pretty major for your organization. Talk to us about what were they looking for, what it took for you to get this.
So just to take you back a little bit to our journey starting in 2019, we decided back then that we were going to stop measuring employee satisfaction and really look at measuring employee engagement. And Great Place to Work, that's a hallmark of what they do and what they measure for. And the way they measure for engagement is really looking at what they call their trust index. Trust in the organization, trust in the leadership, trust in the work that we do, and trust in our mission. So that's really what we were looking to achieve in terms of building that, continuing to build that trust and confidence of our employees.
And so as you look at this certification, a lot of people are saying, wow, you know, you had a benchmark for 2023, you got it done in 2022, and now you've got the opportunity to go forward. What does this mean for you as you move forward with this certification?
Well, as you know, it's, or you may not know, but it's an annual certification. So we need to recertify every year. And our goal is to continue and maintain that certification. But just to tell you a little bit about, again, about the journey, when we started the journey in 19, you know, we set the goal, we had our first survey, and we fell short of being certified. And then 2020, the pandemic hit. We did a lot of things during that time, and our motto during that period was really taking care of the employees, because they are the ones who take care of our patients and our residents. So we did a lot of things and put a lot of programs in place to try to address the needs, and we really wanted to meet people where they were. We have about 350 of our employees out of our population of 4,000 that work in the Bronx. But we're always open and looking to what can we offer, what can we do to meet people where they are. So what we did in 2020 was we took the survey, and instead of the traditional survey, we really measured what people needed and what people wanted. And the results were pretty remarkable and surprising at that time, but people asked for assistance with mental health. They wanted more emotional support. And if you remember what we were going through back in 2020, mental health and emotional support was a really, really big deal in terms of giving people that, that service. So we did a number of things. We have a chaplaincy program. We are a faith-based organization. So we have a chaplaincy program that we provide Catholic priests to a number of healthcare providers, hospitals and nursing homes in New York State. So we were able to mobilize that team, and we provided one-on-one, I won't call it counseling, but conversations that people were able to have with those chaplains. We have on staff a bereavement counselor that we also made available, just to kind of give people, again, another opportunity to be able to talk about what they were going through. And then we kicked off what we call Meditation Mondays. And I have to tell you, I'm a big believer in meditation these days. And that Meditation Monday is a very, very popular day for us in terms of people participating virtually, of course, in that meditation. So again, we've done a number of things during the pandemic to try to address some of the needs and meeting people where they were. And a lot of those initiatives, I think, led to the certification that we were able to obtain.
So somebody doesn't know all about ArchCare. Tell me a little bit more about the services and the programs that you have to offer.
Absolutely. So ArchCare, we are a post-acute healthcare organization. We offer residential services. So we operate 6 nursing homes in New York, 2 of them in the Bronx, St. Vincent de Paul and Providence Rest. We have what we call home and community-based services, where we offer home care, both nurses as well as aides. We have a managed long-term care plan that provides coverage for individuals with chronic conditions. We have a Medicare Advantage plan, and we have a PACE program, ArchCare Senior Life. ArchCare Senior Life, and the easiest way to describe it, it's a nursing home without walls. So all the services that you would get in a nursing home, you would get through the PACE program. All of your primary care, your social work, your recreation, there's a day center component, transportation's available and provided. But at the end of the day, the individuals go home back into the community. And that's something that we started several years ago and obviously is important to the people that we serve.
And what about health plans?
Health plans, as I said, the managed long-term care plan, caring for people with chronic conditions, the Medicare Advantage plan, which sits on top of the nursing home benefit and is a nurse practitioner model that provides additional clinical services. And again, our PACE program.
Yeah. And so for somebody who wants more information, how do they go about accessing and finding out the great things at ArchCare?
Well, we have a very robust website that you can visit and see and read a lot of the information. Testimonials are on there, videos. There is an info@archcare.org that individuals could email if they want more information. And we also have a care navigation number that people can call, which is listed on the website, and ask for assistance either about nursing home care, senior services, et cetera.
Well, Hugo, it's been great having you, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing a little bit about ArchCare. Congratulations on the certification. As you said, you got it done a year early, and yeah, it's something that you have to do year after year, huh?
That's right, and that's the differentiator, Darren. We offer sign-on bonuses up to $20,000 for certain positions for individuals that come work at ArchCare. So visit the website and visit our career section.
All righty. Well, we got to leave it there. Hugo Pizarro, our guest, and thank you so much for being with us. And as I told you before, he is the Senior Vice President and Chief Experience Officer at ArchCare. And if you want more information, yes, please go visit the website, archcare.org. Also follow them on Facebook at ArchCare Official.
And we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of the Best of Open 2022 right after this.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, amigo.
Gracias. Thank you.
What's wrong, amigo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org. Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
And welcome back. You are watching the Best of Open 2022 Wednesday edition. Albert Einstein College of Medicine researchers were studying the effects of COVID-19 on the brains of adults who had mild or asymptomatic infection. We sat down with doctors from Montefiore to discuss this even more.
Well, I understand that you're studying brain changes that are caused by COVID-19. Can you give me a little bit more insight as to why you found this to be so necessary?
Well, maybe I'll start with that, Darren. I'm an infectious disease physician, and when this pandemic arrived in the Bronx, February, March of 2020, we were really focused on saving people's lives. This virus was causing a high mortality rate, and we got through it. We got the vaccine, we have some therapies now. And now what we're noticing from our patients, including those who had just mild COVID, that they're reporting a plethora of symptoms, everything from palpitations, not able to exercise as well, maybe some feeling like pins and needles in their skin. And then they're also complaining of problems with memory, focus, a mental fogginess. And we're now starting to study that complication. And as an infectious disease doctor for 20, 25 years, I have to say this is sort of an unusual long-term complication of a viral infection. So I think there's something very new going on, and we need to understand it, both to quantify it, who is it affecting, or certain people at risk, and are there treatments for this? And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
And Michael can, provide his insights into why we were doing this study.
Yeah, because Dr. Lipton, in understanding, a lot of research has gone into COVID-19, and we know that your study is a little bit different. So can you give us a little bit how this study is different compared to others?
Sure. So we know from pretty early on in the pandemic that COVID-19 was associated with some very severe effects on the brain. All kinds of people were coming in with stroke that shouldn't have had it. There was inflammation in the brain, and there were some other changes. And now, with the people who were hospitalized with severe COVID, we see that they have, as Dr. Daly just mentioned, these long-term problems. The question really that we're asking is different in that we want to understand whether having the infection, even if you weren't symptomatic or weren't so symptomatic, could be creating similar problems in the brain at a lower level that people might not realize exactly what is going on. And those are problems that might actually accumulate over time. So what's very unique about this study is, on the one hand, that we're looking at people who were not so sick. But on the other hand, we are looking at a unique group of individuals, mostly residents of the Bronx, who we studied before the pandemic. So a key unique feature of this study is that we're taking people on whom we already have a very clear virus ever existed. And we can then look at how things may have changed in the brains of these individuals, whether they were never sick and they just had the stress of the pandemic, or they had an asymptomatic infection, or maybe they were symptomatic but weren't so ill. So that baseline is really a key feature, because we can see subtle effects that may be causing problems now, or maybe something that could be a problem in the future.
So how do you go about conducting this study? What will the study actually entail?
So Dr. Lipton, as he said, he's been studying young, healthy people in the Bronx, and he has baseline measurements, which is absolutely critical, because any change we see, we're going to feel more confident that that is from having the infection. So we're going to go back to his cohort of about 800 Bronx residents who participated in the study before the pandemic, and invite them back. And they don't have to have any symptoms. They're just going to have had COVID, have not had COVID, or just be colonized. And then we're going to repeat a lot of the tests that Dr. Lipton already had, neurocognitive tests and neuroimaging. And we'll do that 3 times over 3 years. And that will answer 2 questions. What are the actual measurable differences, and how long do they last?
And so when we take these tests, or when they take these tests, I should say, the question will arise as to how do we know specifically that it's COVID? Because over the course of years, there could be somebody with a different health ailment. How are we so certain that this will actually attribute back towards COVID?
Yeah, that's really the key question. And I think that there are at least 2 important pieces there. One of them is it really due to COVID as opposed to maybe some pre-existing problem? And that's why having the baseline is important, because we know in all of these people what their brains looked like on MRI. We know what their brain function was like from a whole battery of tests. And we even have blood samples from before the pandemic, and we can see what change has occurred. So that's how we really address the idea that this might have been there before. We can be pretty clear that what we see is a change. The other question is whether it might not be the infection, but it might have been the experience, the stressful experience of the whole lockdown and the pandemic. And for that, it's really important that we're not only interested in following individuals who had COVID. It's very important for us to also find people who didn't have COVID and look at how they managed over that period of stress, because stress has effects on the brain, on the way the brain will look on MRI, on the way brain functions and people's symptoms. So by having these different groups of individuals, infected or not infected, and following them over time, we're hoping to tease apart the sort of pandemic experience effect as opposed to that plus the COVID effect. And, identifying who was infected and who was not infected is not trivial. That's a really important part of what we do, and that's really Dr. Daly's expertise. We're going to be leveraging some pretty sophisticated testing on these individuals to understand whether they really were infected or not.
Yeah. When you talk about stress, I know that's a part of it too, identifying people who were stressed during COVID-19. How do you go about identifying stress, if you will, because how does that show up in your study, if you will, when you do this research?
Right. So we actually use some very specific and extensively studied tests, psychological tests that look at the effects of stress, that look at the effects of isolation and loneliness, and we assess things including brain areas that we know are in particular affected by stress, and especially chronic stress. So we can get a sense from the way somebody responds to the testing, as well as what things look like in their brain, whether there is evidence that they had a greater or lesser degree of this chronic stress during that period of time. I mean, as you say, different people will have experienced the same epoch of isolation differently.
Yeah. Dr. Johanna, in all your research so far, anything so far surprise you that you could tell us about what you've learned through this COVID-19 pandemic?
People's resilience. I was on the wards in 2020, 21. I have to say, you just saw the nurses and people pull together. That never gets on TV, but the resilience was mind-blowing. The bravery of patients was mind-blowing that were going through it and their families. And I think at that time in 2020, we were collecting patients' plasma from people who had recovered, and then the community really responded in terms of donating their plasma to try to treat somebody with severe disease. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I was able to witness really the resilience. In terms of this infection, I think, as I said earlier, to see these unusual complications weeks to months after recovering from a viral illness, which we've all had many over our life, that is striking to me. The other thing is we still don't have a handle on what is causing these long-term complications. Is it there's still hidden virus? Is it that our body is making an autoantibody and attacking ourselves? So I'm pretty excited to see how that plays out. And our own patients will be collecting samples, storing them. And as the science develops, we can go back to our own incredibly carefully characterized cohort and start to test, are there biomarkers and things like that. So I think the science going forward is going to be really interesting. And we're prepared to then integrate that into the program.
Dr. Lipton, before we go, I want to pose the same question to you. Anything surprise you or anything really stand out as you began to do this COVID-19 research?
Well, I was somewhat surprised that when we studied a small number of individuals who had lived through at least the early phases of the pandemic, that in people who really felt they were okay, they really didn't have symptoms, we were able to see some measurable change in their brain. And we're using some very sophisticated quantitative measures to look at the brain with MRI and to look at people's brain function with cognitive tests. And it's remarkable because when we think, as Dr. Daly had said, when we think about something like the flu, while influenza could certainly be deadly, the people who survive and get better get better. We don't really see in general that they have long-term effects, especially on the brain. So I think it's quite interesting that this virus seems to be not just the flu, as some people like to say. There really seems to be something else to it. It also is, a little bit surprising to me that as we go on over time, it's still really not clear what is going on in the brain. That something is going on, I think people are beginning to understand, but exactly what it is it the infection? Is it just inflammation? Is it a stress effect? We really don't know. And that's really why we're targeting a lot of these cutting edge methods to try and not just detect the changes, but really figure out what's the mechanism, what is happening in the brain because that can lead us to think about ways to treat people.
Dr. Johanna Daly, Dr. Michael Lipton, thank you so much for your work. And certainly we'll be following back up with you to find out what you've learned and what we can tell Bronx residents and residents across the city. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daren.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know if you want more information, don't hesitate to visit the website at einsteinmed.edu and then also on Twitter and Instagram at EinsteinMed.
And we have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Best of Open 2022 right after this.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is vaping? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, backpack kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
We're back, and over the last year, Mott Haven has had a development boom right in their area. The neighborhood has had large-scale residential development, and more than 5,000 combined apartments are expected to be constructed over the next few years. We had a chance to speak with the director of B6 Real Estate Advisors, Mitchell Flaherty, to give us more.
Glad to have you back. And, you know, if you're living in the Mott Haven section, certainly a lot of people have seen new construction go up. A lot of people have been having concerns as to what's going to actually happen in that neighborhood. But as we see, more and more development is going this way. Give us some insight into what Mott Haven is going to look like.
Yeah, well, I think it's very exciting times for Mott Haven. There's obviously a lot of development going on. 5,000 units coming online within the next 5 years, as you mentioned. It's important that a component of the new market rate housing being built is affordable to serve the local Bronxites. So that leads onto a key component of the 421A tax abatement, which we discussed last time I was on the show, being extended. Currently, that program expires in June of this year, June the 15th. So we're waiting to hear back from Albany in terms of whether that program is going to be extended or what the new program is going to look like. But Mott Haven in 5 to 10 years' time is going to look like a very different place than it does today.
A lot of people are saying that, and we know that there's been plenty of questions that have been asked about Mott Haven, particularly in the area of affordable housing. As a lot of this new construction and new development goes, excuse me, people worried about affordable housing. What do we see affordable housing looking like under this new development?
So under the current rules, to get the 421A tax abatement, 30% of the units have to be affordable. The affordability is based on the AMI bands of the area. So AMI is an acronym for Area Median Income. So HBD, which is a government New York organized institution, they take an average of the area income in the area, and then they try and justify the rents based on the income for that area. So, you know, there should be a lot of affordable units coming online within these projects. A lot of them are applied for via Housing Lottery, via Housing Connect, for any of your viewers that are interested. But another area, apart from Mott Haven, where we're seeing a lot of affordable housing being built is Jerome Avenue. Jerome Avenue was rezoned back in March 2018, purposely for affordable development, where there was an MIH component. MIH means mandatory inclusionary housing. So any developer that's building along that Jerome Avenue corridor has to do a large portion of affordable units. So, you know, in order to get out of a housing crisis, you have to build more, you have to increase the supply, because at the moment we're not building enough. So any rezoning and development that's taking place and that's adding units to the borough, in my eyes, is a good thing.
Well, you got a 37% poverty rate right there in Mott Haven. And so we know what that means for people in the area. But when we look at types of properties being developed, we know that there's a question and a call for a lot of mixed use property, where that means simply you'll have a building on a commercial building possibly on the bottom level and a residential on the top. What can you tell us about mixed use as it's coming to Mott Haven?
Yeah, so that's a good point, actually. So you're seeing a lot more schools come to the area, like KIPP. They're a big charter school in New York. They bought a site on 138th, the old taxi cab lot. They're building a 200,000 square foot building there. There's another one on Grand Concourse, which is the school. I think it's Success Academy with residential apartments above. So when you're building all these residential units, it's important to create a community and add to that community with different use types. So the Bronx, the Mott Haven is definitely under retailed. And I think that, you'll start to see new retailers come to the area as new residents move in, because it just creates a community along with schools and other, like local, I think there's a local book on Alexander Avenue. So as I mentioned, as you're building all these units, you need to add different use types to make it a real community.
Yeah. For us, who's asking the question, you'll see Mott Haven on the map in terms of a developing and a burgeoning community. We know that over the course of the next few years, it's going to look totally different. But what's it going to look like for those people who surround the Mott Haven neighborhood? What kind of impact can we see in these communities?
Well, hopefully these affordable units can be built that can serve the existing populations. That's the purpose. We don't want them to have to be forced out of their current neighborhood they've grown up in. So as I mentioned, the extension of the 429A tax payment is key to building these affordable units, because otherwise it just doesn't make economic sense for developers to build, because the reality is real estate taxes in New York are very high. So as long as the 429A is extended and developers get that tax payment to build affordable units, then I'm hopeful that a lot of the residents can stay in the area.
There is one particular property on 351 Powers Avenue. And I wanted to bring that up in specific because when we talk about 351 Powers Avenue, looking at residents are actually going to have an opportunity, or I should say the community is going to have an opportunity to share their voice in terms of how this property and what it looks like. Am I correct?
I don't know that property in particular, but most affordable units are obtained via a housing lottery. So any local resident that lives in the area can apply for the housing lottery to get the affordable unit. They should have to go on housingconnect.com. A lot of locals don't know about that, but it's important, for us, people advocates in the industry, to reach out to them and show them the path how to, get an affordable housing unit.
Why is Mott Haven considered to be the key place where we're seeing a lot of this development? Is it because there's a lot of waterfront parks around there?
Well, yeah, if you look at anywhere in the world, there's always a premium for real estate on the water, just given the views of the skyline. There also, is the land base of Mott Haven is relatively low in comparison to areas of Brooklyn and Long Island City. So, and another great thing is that it's transportation access into Manhattan is so quick. You can get into Midtown in 15 minutes. So its location, its transport infrastructure, along with the waterfront, makes it poised well for developers to want to come in and build in the area.
Admittedly, though, it's a little bit challenging and an uphill battle, considering the fact that there's been this rezoning. I think rezoning has really opened the door and opened a gateway for a lot of this development to be able to take place. So if you're a neighborhood resident, somehow you're still under the stronghold, if you will, of being able to have your voice heard, given the fact that rezoning has opened the door for a lot of stuff that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's why on Jerome Avenue, as mentioned, that rezoning had an MIH component, which means the developer would have to do affordable housing. I'm not involved in rezoning policies in New York, but the understanding, there was a lot of undeveloped waterfront in Mott Haven. So the last administration thought it would be advantageous to the area to rezone and create more units being built. Sorry, excuse me.
No worries.
So yeah, I think the important component is the affordability. Obviously, I'm a big advocate for affordable housing development. I think it's key on all different levels. Even in the high income level, there's not affordable housing units, and the low income level and the medium income level. So, as I mentioned before, when there's a housing shortage, rents are going to rise. So to get out the affordable housing crisis, you need to increase the number of units being built, which New York City has not done.
How does it feel for you? Because when you think about to be probably the most active when we talk about development zones across the 5 boroughs,
Yeah.
Mount Haven seems to be that place, and you're connected right there to it. So what's that feeling like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I speak to a lot of owners in the area and what their plans are. A lot of them have been in the area for a long time. Obviously, a lot of their property values have gone up. And, I represent my clients selling their building from a high price. So they're happy with the current values. But also a lot of them are just wanting to stay in the area and continue to see the growth of the area and, they're generational owners, so they'll pass it on to their children, etc. But there's certainly a lot going on. There's a lot. I think Douglaston Development bought the last site available on the water last week, which is on 138th and Madison Avenue Bridge. So as I mentioned, it's Mount Haven is going to look like a very different place in 5 years' time.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to see what Mount Haven has, and certainly we'll continue to make our viewers aware and those who are aware of what's going on in the Mount Haven area. Mitchell Flaherty, thank you so much for being with us again, and of course, got to have you back as we continue to have this conversation.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, look forward to coming back sometime.
Appreciate having you. All righty. Well, want to let you know if you want more information, please visit the website, B6realestateadvisors.com. And there you can find more information about what is going on in Mount Haven.
We are taking a quick break. We'll be back with more Best of Open 2022.
You can now watch MNN, Brick TV, QPTV, and SIC TV on BronxNet. Tune in to BX Omni, Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Fios during most Sunday evenings. We'll show you some amazing content from our friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Brick TV in Brooklyn, Queens Public Television, and Staten Island Community Television. Every borough represented in the Boogie Down. Epic partnerships for the ages. And catch our new Next channel, produced in partnership with MNN, 24/7 on BronxNet Channel 952 Optimum and 2138 Fios.
According to the FBI's National Crime Information Center database, in 2020, 40% of all women and girls reported missing were people of color, which is 100,000 out of 250,000, despite making up only just 16% of the population. We sat with the digital editor and reporter for the Bronx Times, Robbie Sakita. He discussed the silent epidemic. We'll take a look at that segment right now. And Robbie, thank you for being with us. These numbers are literally staggering and alarming. What can you tell us more about discussions and what's being uncovered here?
Yeah, pleasure to be on the show, first of all. It's, I think that there's, at least in the anecdotal conversations I've had with people, as well as talking to, law enforcement, as well as talking to people who have kind of been making this an issue and kind of raising more awareness, is that when women of color go missing, there's kind of an initial issue in the process of kind of the believability. A lot of people were telling us that when, if a woman of color goes missing, oftentimes their disappearance is kind of written under a voluntarily leaving, or it might put some other kind of truancy or other type of things that kind of move it from a missing case to kind of a more they voluntarily left, which really isn't the case in a lot of ways. And also we find that isn't a pattern that's also reflected amongst when a white woman is missing. And that's to say that when anyone goes missing, they should all be found. But we're finding that these discrepancies in terms of people looking into the investigations or the disappearances of women of color is kind of grossly underinvested, or maybe grossly I would say maybe under-resourced for those families when they're looking to uncover someone who's missing.
We hear the word trafficking, and that's a big word that goes on. When I've talked to people in law enforcement, there's an admission trafficking is real. However, I don't think that when we get to the real nitty-gritty that they want to let people know that it's more prevalent than we're actually getting information on. And from working behind this desk, I've had the opportunity to talk to so many people who say, listen, Daren, when it comes to trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, we find predominantly women of color, indigenous people. Those are the persons that are on the front lines of trafficking. But because it's people of color and indigenous, they don't get the kind of media coverage as it would if it was someone else. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say that for this story, I know I reached out. The focal point of my story was this indigenous woman who lives in Washington State. She was kidnapped at 6 years old and 36 years old, which is 30 years apart. And she was telling me that, a lot of the women that she was trafficked with were also indigenous women. And to that degree, there is a cycle of violence that happens to women of color that happens at a disproportionate rate towards white women. So looking at that first and seeing that will also kind of translate to possibly being trafficked or possibly being in abusive situations where you are coerced into leaving or coerced into, kind of maybe packing up your life and leaving without a trace. There's an issue that a lot of people talk about where they're not looking at kind of these numbers and kind of correlating that to a disappearance or correlating it to death or correlating it to, any really meaningful preventative measures to protect women of color who go missing. But also another stark issue when it comes to media coverage. We could probably off the top of my head, I can, list, Gabby Petito and Natalie Holloway as two high-profile, high-prominent, women of, white women who were missing. But, their cases were, national profile. There's a Lifetime movie coming out about Gabby Petito. But we see this kind of a swath of women who go missing, especially indigenous women who go missing per capita, which is the highest out of any, group of women. But there's very little in their coverage. There's very little in their efforts to recover them by law enforcement or even the community at large. It kind of just is, this silent epidemic is what they label it as. So there is a lot of truth to that. And I think there's a lot of ways in which people say, hey, this is an issue, that's an issue. But overall, it seems to be that when someone is a woman of color and they're going missing, there's often just a lack of attention being put to the reasons why they go disappearing, and then also the recovering of their recovery. Excuse me.
Yeah, bringing correction to this is what a lot of people are talking about. How can you get to the place where we bring correction, where it's more reporting, where it's more resources being deployed? I know Congress is acting. Bring us up to speed as to what Congress is looking to do to be able to address this issue.
Yeah, so one of the big first steps was this, congressional hearing and being able to hear really the tragic stories from mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers of people who've lost someone who's missing, and really talking about how there's a lot of things that can be done. Now, there's a lot of acts that have been in Congress. There's the Violence Against Women Act, there's a Frederick Douglass Trafficking and Prevention Act, and a lot of these would be looking at kind of resourcing public safety to be able to address the incidents of when someone goes missing, and then figuring out the ways in which they have kind of maybe fallen short of recovering anyone who's missing, but also especially the disproportionate amount of women of color who are missing or end up dead. There's, similar bills that are happening here, in New York State. There is legislation that would create a statewide task force that would kind of urge more urgency into missing cases, but also looking into why are, women of color who go missing labeled as runaways in the first place. That is obviously going to detract from enough attention from law enforcement to go look for them. And even, and crucially enough, when it comes to media coverage, a lot of media, whether it's news or paper or print or digital, they may not recover it if they feel that the person, if the reasoning for that person's disappearance is because of whether it's truancy or it's runaway. So there's a lot of things on both a federal level and a local level that is hoping to look at, hey, why is this such a silent epidemic? But also, what is that going to take? And talking to people who are kind of on the ground with this, they want to see really kind of an expansive, whether it's dispelling myths, whether it's clearing up these discrepancies and disproportionate rates. It's to just look at when someone goes missing, how can we improve the process of their recovery?
Talking to several sources that are close to this matter, I've heard that said before, listen, when you talk about this issue, it seems as though the stereotypes are there. A person's a runaway. They're not, the truancy issues. It's really not that serious. They'll come up in a day or two. And the fact is, many times, these people don't return. They're still on the missing list. Let's look at New York State's numbers for a minute. We have 606 current list of missing persons, 11 of those coming out of the borough of the Bronx, 9 being persons of color. Also, according to most recent state data, the largest single group of missing children involves Black females ages 13 and up. Literally almost 30%, 29.2% of all cases reported. And, you know, there is legislation that's being done that we want to talk about. You talked about the legislation that's being done. It was Bronx City Council person Althea Stevens who proposed the legislation about these missing girls, and then also having that label taken away of being runaway. Where do we see this going? Because we know that there's legislation out there. How quick can we see some attention to the legislation and possibly some legislation that's enacted into law?
That's a good question. I think, you know, obviously, depending on what the makeup of Congress is going to be, you know, in the next, you know, couple of days or weeks as we figure out, and also the runoff, I would say that this, in terms of figuring out the issues with, you know, this silent disparity, it seems to be a bipartisan effort. There seems to be, you know, there's raw data that, you know, you can't really ignore when you look at it. And there's a lot of admittance that there needs to be something done with how missing persons cases are dealt with. Also, you know, the reliability of missing persons data isn't exactly reliable for a lot of people. There's a lot of undercounting on women of color who go missing, related to obviously some of the implicit biases and reasons for maybe why someone, or explanations of why someone was missing in the first place. It's gonna be interesting to see how it's going to progress. I would, you know, when I talked to John Bischoff, who works for the Missing Children Division, he said that, you know, they really would like to see kind of things start to happen really in the next couple of months, you know, even maybe to the next year, of just kind of getting more attention rolled out. But really, one of the big things that's going to have to happen, even if legislation's in place, is for law enforcement to take it seriously. And that means that if, you know, a family, you know, if it's, you know, a woman of color who's going missing, it's being believed that, hey, they went missing and we need you to look for them. Rather than, in some cases, people are saying that, you know, it's kind of pushed, as you mentioned, it's being kind of pushed aside, or they're going to come back in one day. And he said that, you know, any amount of legislation isn't going to be able to fix that. So that's something that needs to be fixed. And I think that's kind of where these task force measures come into place. It's going to be able to examine what is the breadth, what is the amount of access and resources that, you know, local departments can do to be able to recover, you know, missing persons, and also, you know, the volume of people who are missing in various states. Because in some areas where, you know, Indigenous women have gone missing, you know, Washington State, for example, you know, they were telling me that, you know, lack of Wi-Fi access, lack of, you know, central hubs of public safety make it a really easy area for people to be preyed upon and to be taken from their areas. So there's a lot of kind of hands-on efforts that are going to have to be taken in the next couple of years to kind of drive down a really, really disturbing rate of disappearances.
I know, Robbie, you'll be following this, and of course we'll follow you as well, and also we'll be staying connected on this so that way we can really put some light on a very harrowing situation when it comes to missing people. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
Well, that's all. A look back for 2022. And as always, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch a recablecast or watch it anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. For all of us here on Open, we look forward to continuing to keeping you informed as we begin this new year. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. Make sure to keep this channel wide open. We're saying take care and God bless.